leading hospitals, but it has a particular role to play in terms of medicine and the medical profession in Jamaica and the Caribbean. It's a teaching hospital, so it's not entirely owned by Jamaica, but other CARICOM members. And it is, as I said, the hospitals where we teach, train doctors. Yeah. So it holds a particular place. And unfortunately, this morning, the university hospital is being reported on in very negative terms based on a performance audit of the hospital by the Auditor General. What is happening there is embarrassing, shameful, based on the findings of this performance audit of the Auditor General. Essentially, the audit has found that there's a breakdown, if not a systemic lack of the university hospital following the procurement rules, absence of effective needs assessment, absence of key strategic documents causing major gaps in the procurement management process. That process at UA is deficient in basic needs assessment and planning. It is not utilizing the Government of Jamaica electronic procurement portal. The widespread absence of documentation, along with violations of procurement laws and procedures. It is also being accused, or it was found by the Auditor General that UA has abused its tax-exempt status to facilitate importation of goods on behalf of private companies, contributing to losses amounting to $23 million. And it has also been engaged in after-the-fact procurement practices. According to the Auditor General, it began procurement processes and invited suppliers to bid even though the goods or services have already been provided or the work has been completed. According to the Auditor General, UA has been separating works into small components and used the direct contracting methodology to engage contractors. It is also facing now an investigation by the police fraud squad. Yes. The police fraud squad has been called in to probe a report that the hospital unlawfully used its tax-exempt status. Yes. That is fraudulent use of its privilege. Yeah. It's a lot to report this morning on UA. We understand that at least one of 4 companies, which the Auditor General says received tax-exempted supplies and equipment imported by the hospital, is owned by a prominent politician. Yes? We have more in this report from Mahiri Stewart.
The General's report detailing alleged unlawful conduct at the UHWI was tabled in the House of Representatives on Tuesday afternoon. Auditor General Pamela Monroe Ellis's office says customs records showed that items including office furniture, laundry, and medical equipment were declared to Jamaica Customs as hospital imports. But inventory records confirmed that the items were not acquired by the hospital. They were instead obtained by private entities. The Auditor General says the misrepresentation breached the Customs Act, resulting in over $20 million in unpaid import duties. The Auditor General noted that Section 209, subsection 1 of the Customs Act prohibits false declarations on customs documents, with violations subject to fines and prosecution. The Auditor General says, for example, UHWI used its tax exemption status to import laundry equipment valued at $28 million for an entity identified as Private Company 1. This action, the Auditor General says, caused revenue loss of $6.6 million, with UHWI paying the remaining import duties of $1.9 million. The Auditor General says similarly, UHWI facilitated the importation of office furniture and medical equipment valued at over $40 million for another two entities which were indemnified as Private Companies 2 and 3. This action, the Auditor General says, resulted in tax revenue losses to the Jamaican state of $10.7 million. It's understood that the entity which the Auditor General refers to as Private Company 1 is owned by a group of several business people. Private Company 2, which it alleged benefited from the unlawful use of UHWI's tax exemption status, is owned by a prominent politician. Up until recently, another senior politician was listed online as being a member of the board of directors of the company. The Auditor General's department also stated in its report that the UHWI also inappropriately used its tax exemption status to import 40 waste bins for a company which was identified as Private Company 4. The Auditor General says in its initial response dated August 2025, UHWI confirmed that it has ceased facilitating imports for private entities using its tax exemption status. According to the Auditor General, UHWI acknowledged that this practice violated public trust and Jamaica's procurement laws. The Auditor General says, in addition, UHWI reiterated its acceptance of the findings pending further investigation. The hospital also said it was seeking suitable measures to prevent a recurrence of such activities. Mahiri Stewart for Nationwide News.
Thank you, Mahiri. And when you read further into the report, it's rather distressing, very distressing. For example, the Auditor General says here, despite the substantial increase in public health funding from $76 billion in 2019-2020 to $153 billion in 2024-25, that's a period of what, 5-6 years. The country has virtually doubled the spend on public health. And the Auditor General says, despite that doubling in expenditure, concerns remain regarding the state of public health infrastructure and the ongoing challenges faced in delivering effective healthcare services. And that is why this audit is so terribly important, because it's a question of whether we're getting value for the money. The Auditor General says, of the total $671 billion allocated during this period, 2019 to 24-25, of that $671 billion, listen to this, more than half of it, 54% of it, $361 billion, yeah, was directed towards salaries and emoluments for public health professionals. This left 46% of that total, or $310 billion, to address essential requirements. Essential requirements, not my words, the words of the Auditor General. Essential requirements such as hospital equipment, supply chain management, and infrastructure development. As such, robust procurement practices were essential to ensure that healthcare facilities were properly equipped and that resources were utilized efficiently. We must not lose sight of that, because this is why how we acquire goods and services is so important, to make sure you, the user, the ordinary citizen at the end of the day, get value for money. And it's not a shortage of money. It is about how well we're utilizing that money. Is the system being so abused so we're not getting value for money? And that is what this is about. You, the end user. When you go to UA, you can't get through, or you hear you can't get this test done because the equipment not working. That equipment has been procured in a way that is detrimental to you. And this is why, on reading this report, it is so distressing. According to the key findings of the Auditor General, the management of the procurement process at the hospital is being undermined by the absence of critical strategic documents, meaning paying attention to details so you can hold the suppliers accountable. According to the Auditor General, UA failed to fulfill its obligation to prepare the required annual procurement plans, providing only 2 out of the 7 mandated plans between 2018-19 and 24-25. The Board of Directors did not approve the plans, and the 2 plans omitted essential information, such as item counts. So in other words, you buy certain goods and you don't count the items to make sure you get what you're paying for. Procurement timelines, suppliers, procurement methods, and performance indicators, despite the requirements set out in the Government of Jamaica's Public Procurement Handbook. Additionally, says the Auditor General, UA failed to provide any approved strategic plans for this period, even though US $186,600 was paid to 2 consultants for strategic and operational reviews in 2022 and 2024. Wow. So the paid consultants, 186,000 US at today's rate is more than almost $25 million. So what were they paid for? Furthermore, UA has not submitted annual reports and audited financial statements for 2019-20 to 24-25, detailing how approximately $65 billion in subventions were used. Really? The lack of these key documents may have contributed to operational deficiencies and negatively affected governance standards in public procurement. And the report from the Auditor General continues to make distressing reading. Yeah. UA could not provide procurement documentation for 51 contracts valued at $521 million. The lack of these documents prevented a thorough review of whether the transactions adhered to procurement regulations and met the standards of transparency, accountability, and value for money. Key materials, including requisitions, tender documents, bid submissions, evaluation reports, and procurement records, were not available. So this sounds like a systemic breakdown at UA. And then the most egregious of them all, UHWI inappropriately utilized its tax-exempt status to import goods for private companies, resulting in losses totaling more than $23 million. Customs records showed that items such as office furniture, laundry, and medical equipment were declared as hospital imports, but inventory records confirmed these were not acquired by the hospital. Them rob you, and were instead obtained by private entities. This misrepresentation breached the Customs Act, resulting in more than $20 million in unpaid import duties. For example, the Auditor General says UHWI used its tax-exempt status to import laundry equipment valued at approximately $28 million for private company one, causing a revenue loss of $6.6 million, with UHWI paying the remaining import duties and charges of $1.9 million, bringing the total loss to $8.5 million. She also says, similarly, UHWI facilitated the import of office furniture and medical equipment valued at $40.6 million, as well as cups and dishes worth $1.4 million for private companies 2 and 3, resulting in revenue losses of $10.7 million. Now, you notice she said private company 1, 2, 3, and private company 4. And that is where it gets very, very murky. Who are these companies? And based on what we are learning, these companies have some very powerfully connected directors and owners. Powerful connections, including politicians sitting in the parliament, have connections to some of these companies, including very senior members of the medical profession, some of whom are in high places at the University Hospital of the West Indies. Yes. And I know you've been asking who it is. Well, we have to be very diligent, because you notice the Auditor General herself didn't name these companies. She said private company 1, 2, and 3. So we now have to do some more work. We hear the names, but we have to get further and better particulars, because you know how they love to sue we. Yes? So we have to make sure we have the receipts before we go say it is John Brown or Mary Brown. But people in the medical profession, people at UA, know who these are. Yeah. I see where the Minister of Health, Dr. Christopher Tufton, has said that he's taking immediate steps to address the governance and accountability gaps highlighted by the audit report. We're going to have more on that after the break.
My hands were steady.